The empire of Sarathis stretched across the stars like a sea of shining jewels. Every world in its reach was linked by glowing networks of energy. The people of Sarathis were proud of their luminous nature. Their bodies carried streams of light that flowed under their skin like rivers of color. The stronger the glow, the higher the status. At the heart of this empire stood the Crystal Palace, a structure so tall it seemed to touch the edge of space. There lived Queen Allura, the ruler of Sarathis. She was known for her wisdom and grace. Her glow was brighter than any other being in the empire, and many said she was chosen by the stars themselves. Under her rule, peace had lasted for hundreds of cycles, and her people looked to her with devotion. But peace had a cost. Allura often felt the weight of it pressing against her. Every decision she made had to be perfect. Every word had to be wise. She spent her days surrounded by advisors who spoke in careful tones and smiled only when they were sure it was the correct moment to do so. Her nights were quiet, but heavy. Sometimes she would walk alone through the palace gardens, staring up at the stars and wondering if any of them knew how lonely a queen could be. One day, a group of explorers returned from a small blue planet at the edge of the Empire's reach. They called it Earth. It was simple compared to Sarathis, but the explorers had brought strange stories. They spoke of humans, a species that had no visible energy glow, but seemed to carry endless creativity. The explorers said humans built machines, painted art, and dreamed of the stars even before they could reach them. Queen Allura listened with interest. Her advisors dismissed the stories. To them, humans were primitive and unimportant. But Allura was curious. A people without energy who could still reach space? That was unusual. She ordered the explorers to bring a human to the palace, not as a prisoner or display, but as a guest. Weeks later, the ship arrived. From it stepped a man named Tom. He looked small among the luminous guards, but he did not seem afraid. He wore simple clothing and carried a small notebook that he kept close to his chest. His eyes were calm, the color of Earth's ocean. They moved with quiet focus as he studied everything around him. The court was silent as he entered the throne hall. Allura sat upon her crystal throne, her glow filling the room like sunlight. Tom bowed politely, unsure of how to greet a queen from another world. "Welcome, traveler from Earth," Allura said, her voice gentle but strong. "You have come far to reach Sarathis." Tom nodded. "It is an honor, Your Majesty. I did not think I would ever stand before a ruler of another world." The court watched with quiet curiosity. Many of the nobles whispered among themselves. They found it strange that this plain man showed no aura of power, no shimmer of light. To them, he looked unfinished. Allura, however, saw something different. She noticed that Tom did not stare in awe at the glowing walls or the shining robes. Instead, he studied the small details, the way light reflected from the floor, the rhythm of the guard's steps, the faint hum of the palace energy field. He seemed to be learning without asking a single question. She invited him to stay in the palace for a time, to learn about their world and share what he knew of his own. Her advisors protested. They said a being without energy could not survive long in the core of Sarathis, where power flowed through every corner. But Tom did not seem bothered by the atmosphere. He adapted quickly. Over the next few weeks, Allura found herself drawn to him. When they walked through the gardens, he asked questions no one else ever thought to ask. He wanted to know how the plants glowed in the dark, how the light seemed to hum in the air, and whether the sound changed with the seasons. When she told him it did, he smiled with wonder. "You live in a symphony?" he said one evening. "Everything around you sings. I can almost hear it, even if I don't shine like you do." Allura laughed softly. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Most bowed and praised her brilliance, but Tom spoke as if she were simply another being in the universe. It was refreshing. Soon, the palace began to change in small ways. The gardens seemed greener, the fountains clearer. The servants said the queen smiled more often, and the corridors felt warmer when she passed. Some said the human had brought strange luck with him. Others whispered that he was using secret tricks to charm the queen. When the advisors warned her again, Allura listened politely, but made her own choice. She continued to invite Tom to her council meetings. She was impressed by how simply he thought. When complex problems arose, he broke them into smaller, clearer pieces. When the engineers argued about energy patterns, he drew lines in his notebook and showed how balance could be achieved by adjusting rhythms instead of force. One day, the royal scientist asked him how he saw the world without energy vision. Tom replied that he did not need to see the glow to understand harmony. Everything in nature moves in patterns, he said. Sound, light, even thought. If you listen closely, you can feel when something is right or wrong. I learned that long before I ever left Earth. That answer spread through the palace like a quiet wind. The nobles found it strange but could not deny that the humans' ideas often worked. Small improvements appeared everywhere. Machines that had been slow now ran smoother. The great gardens bloomed in brighter shades. The palace water channels became more stable. Allura noticed all of it. But what she noticed most was Tom himself. He never took credit for anything. Whenever something went well, he smiled and said it was the result of the Queen's leadership. Yet, she knew he had guided it in unseen ways. One evening, when the twin moons hung low over the palace, Allura invited Tom to join her on the high balcony. Below them, the city of Sarathis shimmered with countless lights. The sky above looked like a sea of diamonds. "Do you ever miss your world?" she asked. Tom looked thoughtful. "I do. But I also know that every place has its own beauty. On Earth, the sky is never still. Clouds move, winds shift, and even silence has texture. Here, your world glows in ways I could never have imagined. I feel lucky to see it." Allura turned to him. "You speak of beauty in everything, yet you never talk of power. Among my people, power is life." Tom smiled. "Maybe power is not always about brightness. Sometimes it is the quiet that keeps the light steady. Where I come from, we believe strength is not what you show, but what you sustain." For a long time, Allura said nothing. His words stayed with her. She had ruled with wisdom and light. Perhaps she had forgotten the strength of quietness. Weeks turned into months, and her affection for him grew. She found peace in his presence. When he spoke, the noise of court life faded. When he listened, she felt understood. The empire's citizens began to talk about their queen's unusual guest. Rumors spread quickly. Some said he was a secret sage. Others said he was simply lucky. A few believed he had captured her heart. One morning, during the Festival of Stars, Allura stood before the empire and made an announcement that silenced all voices. She declared that she had chosen Tom of Earth as her companion and husband. The court gasped in disbelief. The nobles stared in shock. A queen marrying a being without energy? It had never happened in all of Sarathian history. The advisors tried to change her mind, but Allura's decision was firm. She said, "Power without understanding is empty light. I have found both wisdom and peace in this man. He sees the world not through glow, but through truth. That is the kind of power our empire must learn." Tom, surprised, yet calm, bowed deeply. He did not seek a throne, nor did he desire status. He only promised to stand beside her and share what he could. Their union became the most talked-about event in the empire. Some saw it as a mistake. Others saw it as a sign of hope. Allura did not care for opinions. For the first time in many years, she felt free from the weight of perfection. In the quiet of the palace that night, she looked at Tom and said, "You changed more than you know. You made me see beyond light." Tom replied softly, "You already had that light inside you. I only reminded you to look." The two stood together on the balcony, the empire's glow spreading beneath them. The stars above shimmered as if whispering approval. The queen had chosen something greater than tradition. She had chosen curiosity, kindness, and the quiet power hidden in a human heart. What no one yet knew was that Tom carried a secret even he did not fully understand. A quiet force that would one day change the course of Sarathis forever. But for now, there was peace. And the Queen's unusual choice became the start of a story that would echo across the stars. The news of the Queen's marriage to a human spread across the empire faster than light. On every world of Sarathis, people spoke of it in disbelief. In the crystal cities, the glowing citizens gathered in circles, wondering how their bright queen could love someone without light. Some said she was under a spell. Others said it was a test of faith. A few quieter voices said, perhaps the queen saw something they could not. Inside the palace, the atmosphere changed. Courtiers walked carefully, whispering behind their hands. Advisors shared long glances filled with concern. The royal council held long meetings about maintaining public confidence. No one dared speak badly of the queen aloud. But their silence held questions that weighed the air. Tom felt it, though no one said it to his face. He was polite, gentle, and always smiling, yet people looked at him as if he were made of smoke. To them, he was strange. His body carried no glow. His footsteps did not hum with power. When he passed through the shining corridors, the light dimmed slightly, and servants often moved aside out of quiet habit. Yet Tom never complained. He spent his days learning about Sarathian customs. He studied their energy arts and their science. He asked patient questions and listened carefully to every answer. He joined the engineers in their workrooms, watched how they shaped crystal circuits, and offered ideas that made them think differently. At first, most ignored him. They assumed his curiosity was childish, but when some tried his methods out of amusement, they found strange results. One small energy stabilizer that had failed for months suddenly started working again after Tom suggested adjusting the rhythm instead of the strength. Another day, he helped a gardener fix a water flow problem by changing the timing of the pump rather than replacing it. The workers began to notice that Tom's ideas were not luck. They were simple but clever, and they often worked better than traditional methods. Slowly, word began to spread that the human had an unusual kind of sense. He could not see the energy glow, but he could feel patterns others overlooked. Queen Allura saw all of this with quiet pride. She never forced anyone to accept Tom, but she stood beside him in public gatherings. Her calm confidence slowly made others pause before judging. When she looked at him, there was trust in her eyes, and that trust carried weight in the empire. Still, the royal court could not rest easy. One evening, during a council session, the high advisor named Rilith rose to speak. His glow flickered with unease as he faced the queen. "Your Majesty," he began carefully, "the people respect you above all, but they grow uncertain. They do not understand how one without light can share your throne. They fear what they cannot see." Allura's voice was steady. "Then perhaps we must teach them to see differently." The advisor hesitated. "Your Majesty, it is not so simple. The Sarathian way has always been guided by energy. It flows in our art, our science, even our spirit. This human may be kind, but he stands apart from that flow." Tom, who had been quietly observing, spoke then. His tone was soft and respectful. "Advisor Ryleth, on Earth we have rivers too. Some flow fast, some slow. If a stone sits in the river, it changes the current without shining or moving. Maybe I am only a stone, helping your flow find a new path." There was a moment of silence. No one knew what to say. The metaphor was strange but thoughtful. Allura smiled slightly. "You speak with wisdom, Tom," she said. "Perhaps stillness has its own form of strength." Ryleth bowed, not convinced but unwilling to argue further as the days turned into months. Tom and Allura built a quiet rhythm together. She would handle the affairs of the empire, and he would join her during the evening walks through the palace gardens. Sometimes they sat near the luminous lake that mirrored the stars. Allura would speak of her ancestors, and Tom would share stories of earth-ove oceans that danced under moonlight, forests that whispered in the wind, and cities filled with hope and mistakes. Allura was fascinated by how humans lived without glowing energy, yet found wonder in ordinary things. Tom told her about how humans learned to light their world with fire, then with electricity, and how they dreamed of touching the stars long before they had the tools to reach them. "You create light from darkness," she said once. "That is something my people have never learned. We are born with light and forget how to find it." Tom nodded. "Maybe that is why we needed to meet. Every species can remind the other of what it forgot." Their bond deepened, but so did the whispers. In distant cities, some nobles began to question the queen's decisions. A few even refused to attend royal gatherings. The people still followed Allura, but doubt lingered like a thin mist. One morning, a formal request arrived from the Council of Worlds. They asked the queen to prove that her marriage would not weaken the Empire's energy harmony. It was a polite way of saying they wanted proof that Tom was not a threat. Allura was calm when she read it. "If they seek proof, they shall have it," she said. She arranged for a public event in the Grand Hall of Resonance, where all great energies were tested. The hall was vast, filled with floating crystals that responded to the presence of living beings. The stronger the energy, the brighter the crystals shone. When the day came, thousands gathered. The nobles stood in shining rows. The citizens filled the balconies, and the air hummed with curiosity. Allura stood at the center of the hall, her glow steady and regal. Tom stood beside her, plain and quiet in his simple suit. The High Resonator, an elderly scholar, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, "if your companion truly holds harmony within him, the crystals will respond to his essence." Tom nodded politely. He had no idea what would happen, but he trusted Allura's calm. He stepped toward the center of the hall. The crystals floated around him, spinning slowly. For a long moment, nothing happened. The crowd whispered. A few nobles smiled faintly, thinking the test was over. Then something subtle changed. The crystals stopped spinning, as if listening. A low hum filled the air, softer than a heartbeat. The lights did not grow brighter, but the sound of the hall grew calm. The energy field that usually flickered between guests became smooth and even. It was not the kind of power the Sarathians understood. There was no flash, no glow, no grand display. But the High Resonator's instruments began to show patterns that had never appeared before, perfectly balanced waves, stable and peaceful. "This is strange," the scholar murmured. "The human emits no measurable energy, yet the resonance field has become more stable than ever recorded." "No." The queen smiled faintly. "Sometimes the smallest presence brings the greatest balance." The crowd fell silent. Many could not explain what they felt, but they sensed peace, as if a storm had passed. The nobles, who had come ready to judge, found themselves unable to argue. Even advisor Rylith stood quiet, his expression uncertain. After that day, the whispers began to fade. Some still doubted, but others began to speak of the human's quiet strength. Children in the city played games, pretending to be the calm human who tamed the crystals. Artists painted the scene of the test, showing Tom surrounded not by light, but by soft waves of harmony. Life in the palace settled into a new rhythm. Tom became known as a thoughtful helper. He worked with the engineers to improve systems, the gardeners to restore balance in the palace ecosystem, and with the teachers to design new learning patterns for young minds. He asked questions no one had asked before, and though his hands did not glow, everything he touched seemed to become more balanced. At night, he often sat with Allura on the balcony. "Where the stars shone across the horizon, do you ever feel like they watch us?" he asked one evening, pointing at the stars. "Perhaps," Allura said softly. "The stars remember everything. Maybe they are curious too." Tom smiled. "Then I hope they see peace when they look down." Allura turned to him with warmth in her eyes. "You have brought peace where there was only perfection before. I never thought those two could live together." She paused, thoughtful. "The court may never fully understand you, but I see what they cannot." Tom looked at her with quiet gratitude. "Sometimes seeing is not the same as believing. You believed before anyone else did." The queen reached for his hand. "And I will continue to believe, because your strength reminds me that light is not the only form of power." Unseen by both of them, deep within the palace systems, the central core recorded subtle changes. The energy patterns across the empire were slowly aligning to new rhythms, gentler and more stable. The engineers noticed improved efficiency in many systems, but could not explain why. They did not yet realize that the human's quiet presence was shaping the very harmony of their world. The court still held its doubts. But beneath the surface, Sarathis was changing. Machines began to operate with less strain. Weather patterns on distant colonies grew calmer. Plants bloomed longer. It was as if the universe itself was responding to a new frequency. The Queen knew it was not luck. She had felt it the day she met Tom. There was something within him that reached beyond science, something human yet universal. She did not fully understand it, but she did not need to. As the moons rose high over the palace, their light mingled with the gentle glow of the city below. The Queen stood beside her husband, her heart steady and full. She did not know that the harmony she felt would soon be tested by forces beyond her empire's understanding. The Empire of Sarathis was a world of glowing skies and humming machines, a place where energy flowed through every living being and every crystal. Yet in the quiet halls of the Crystal Palace, a different kind of energy began to stir. Tom, the human from Earth, had become a fixture in the palace, working quietly with engineers, gardeners, and teachers. He was still without glow, yet the palace itself seemed to respond to his presence. Queen Allura noticed it most clearly during the morning walks. Each day, she would move through the palace corridors with Tom by her side. The guards, who had once been wary of him, now greeted him with polite nods. The servants, who had whispered behind closed doors, now spoke of his calm patience. Even the glowing citizens of Sarathis seemed subtly steadier when he was near, though they could not explain why. One morning, Allura led Tom to a part of the palace few had entered before. It was the Chamber of Resonance, a vast room filled with floating crystals that pulsed with the heartbeat of the Empire. The chamber was where the core energy of Sarathis was monitored and maintained. Engineers, scholars, and scientists came here to test new technologies and study energy flows. Tom, Allura said as they stepped inside, this is the heart of our world. It is where every system, every city, and every being connects. Few outsiders are allowed here. Tom's eyes widened slightly as he looked around. He had seen strange machines before, but nothing like this. Crystals floated in midair, spinning slowly as if they had a life of their own. Thin beams of light connected them in a web that stretched across the chamber. The hum of energy was soft, yet constant, a rhythm that filled the air. It is beautiful, Tom said quietly. It feels like the world itself is breathing. Allura smiled. Yes, and it is fragile. Even a small imbalance can cause ripples across the Empire. Tom nodded, studying the patterns of the crystals. He moved closer to one of the larger, floating structures and lightly touched it. Immediately, the hum shifted. The engineers in the room stopped their work and looked toward him in surprise. You can feel it, one of them whispered. Tom looked at them politely. I think I can. On Earth, we study vibrations. Every material, every sound, every system has a natural rhythm. Sometimes all it takes is a small adjustment to restore balance. The high engineer, a tall being named Velis, frowned. You do not have energy glow. How can you affect the resonance of the chamber? Tom shrugged. I do not know. I only listen. Allura watched closely, a quiet hope stirring in her heart. She had seen Tom accomplish small wonders in the palace before, but this was different. The Chamber of Resonance controlled the flow of energy across worlds. If Tom could truly influence it, the consequences would be enormous. For hours, Tom moved among the crystals, observing the way the light and hum shifted. He adjusted the angles of small devices, suggested changes in the timing of energy pulses, and asked questions no one else had thought to ask. Slowly, the engineers noticed that the hum of the chamber became steadier, more balanced. Even the crystals themselves seemed to respond to his subtle movements, pulsing in softer, more harmonious rhythms. Velis, who had been skeptical from the start, stepped forward. This is impossible, he said. Our instruments show no energy from him, yet the system is more stable than ever before. Tom smiled politely. Perhaps energy is not always visible. Perhaps harmony can exist without brightness. Allura placed a hand on his shoulder. You are teaching them something they have never known. Quiet balance is a form of strength. The day passed, and the effects of Tom's adjustments became clearer. Reports from distant colonies came in. Machines that had been failing for months suddenly worked without issue. Transportation networks that had been slow now moved with perfect timing. Even weather control systems, which relied on delicate energy patterns, became steadier. The engineers began to discuss this openly, though they spoke in hushed tones. "It is as if the human carries a hidden frequency," one said. "We cannot measure it, yet it affects everything." Allura listened and nodded. She knew that Tom's ability was unlike anything Sarathis had ever seen. It was not a form of energy they could measure or replicate. It was a human way of thinking, a perspective that relied on observation, patience, and understanding rather than strength. That evening, Allura invited Tom to the palace gardens. The gardens were filled with luminous plants, crystal fountains, and gently glowing insects. The air was fragrant, and the sound of water filled the space. They walked in silence for a time, each enjoying the simple beauty of the moment. "Do you ever wonder why your presence affects the Empire?" Allura asked quietly. Tom thought for a moment. "On Earth, we study harmony. A small change in one part of a system can affect everything else. Maybe I am only noticing what others cannot, and the world is responding naturally." Allura smiled. "Perhaps, but you do more than notice. You guide it without even trying. That is something rare." Tom looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I do not think of it as power. I only think of it as listening. If you listen carefully, you can hear patterns that others cannot. You can feel the balance." Allura nodded slowly. She had always believed that power was measured by brightness, by control, and by influence. Yet Tom had shown her another kind of strength, one that required patience, understanding, and quiet attention. Over the next several cycles, Tom continued to work in the Chamber of Resonance. The engineers grew more confident in following his suggestions, though many still did not fully understand them. The palace staff began to notice subtle changes in their own routines. Tasks that had been difficult became easier. The flow of energy in the palace itself seemed calmer, more stable. Even the queen's personal glow, which had always been steady and bright, now had a warmth that seemed softer, more comforting. The court, which had once been suspicious, began to watch with quiet curiosity. Some nobles still whispered doubts, but others began to ask questions. "How does he do it?" they wondered. "Can his methods help us in our own cities?" One day, during a meeting with the royal council, a young scholar named Lyra spoke up. "Your Majesty," she said, "I have studied the data from the Chamber of Resonance. Since the human arrived, the fluctuations in energy have decreased. Systems are more stable, and efficiency has improved. We cannot explain why, but it is true." Allura turned to Tom with a soft smile. "You see, your quiet work is making a difference." Tom shook his head gently. "I am only doing what I notice. The systems were already trying to balance themselves. I just helped them find it." The council fell silent. Even the most skeptical members could not deny the evidence. That night, Allura and Tom sat on the palace balcony, looking out over the city. The lights of Sarathis shimmered below like countless stars brought to life. "Do you ever tire of all this attention?" Allura asked. Tom shook his head. "I am used to being unnoticed. On Earth, that is normal. People who listen carefully are rarely noticed, yet they shape everything around them." Allura thought about that. Humans, she realized, had a different kind of power. One that was quiet, patient, and invisible until it touched the world. "Do you think your presence will ever be understood?" she asked. Tom smiled softly. "Perhaps not. But understanding is not always necessary. Change can happen quietly, without recognition, and still be powerful." Allura nodded, feeling a sense of peace. She had chosen someone who taught her something the brightest minds of her empire had not. Not all power could be measured by glow. Some forms of strength were subtle, invisible, yet capable of shaping worlds. Weeks passed, and Tom's influence in the palace deepened. He worked with scientists to improve energy networks, with engineers to refine machinery, and with gardeners to restore natural harmony. Every adjustment he suggested was simple, yet effective. He never demanded attention or praise, yet the results spoke for themselves. One day, While examining a section of the chamber that monitored distant planets, Tom paused. His hand hovered over a small crystal that had been flickering erratically for months. He closed his eyes and listened, not with his ears, but with a sense he had developed from years of observation. Slowly, he adjusted the timing of a tiny energy pulse. The crystal stopped flickering and glowed steadily. The engineers gasped. "He did it again," Vela said. "No one else could have balanced that crystal." Lyra watched, her heart swelling with quiet admiration. She knew that this human carried a secret, not of energy, but of understanding, a frequency that connected him to the world in ways Aerithus had never imagined. As the moons rose high above the palace, casting their silver light over the city, Allura turned to Tom. "You have shown me that harmony can exist without brightness. You have reminded me that strength comes in many forms." Tom smiled. "I only listen. The world is full of patterns. Sometimes it just takes someone to notice them." The queen looked out over her empire, her thoughts filled with quiet wonder. For the first time, she felt that the future of Sarathis was not only safe, but full of possibilities. She did not yet know the full extent of Tom's hidden frequency, but she trusted it. She trusted him, and in the silence of the chamber of resonance, a subtle hum spread outward, carrying a gentle promise. The human from Earth had awakened a hidden rhythm within the Empire, one that would guide its people in ways they could not yet see. The true power of humanity, quiet and unseen, was beginning to resonate across the stars. The Empire of Sarathis had known peace for centuries. Its cities glowed, its skies shimmered, and its citizens moved through life with grace and confidence. Under Queen Allura, the Empire thrived, and the presence of Tom, the human from Earth, had brought a subtle but undeniable harmony. The palace hummed with calm. The people felt a sense of balance they had never known. But one morning, everything changed. It began in the outer colonies, far from the central worlds. Reports arrived in quick succession. Crystals that had shone steadily now flickered. Energy flows, once predictable, became irregular. Transportation networks slowed. Even the natural balance of the colony's ecosystems was disturbed. Animals moved differently, plants bent toward unexpected directions, and streams that had flowed for centuries seemed to hesitate at first. The palace staff assumed it was a temporary fluctuation. Energy fields sometimes shifted when planets moved closer to new stars. But the reports kept coming, growing more urgent. The High Engineer Velis summoned all data and began monitoring the Empire's systems. "Your Majesty," Velis said as he entered the throne hall, "there is something unusual happening. It is not a simple fluctuation. The energy network is weakening across all worlds. The crystal cores are dimming. If this continues, it could affect every city, every machine, and every being in Sarathis." Allura listened carefully. Her glow remained calm, but she felt a tension she had never experienced before. She looked at Tom. "Do you sense it?" she asked. Tom closed his eyes, listening. He could not see the glow that others relied upon, but he could feel a rhythm, a subtle pulse that ran through the Empire. It was uneven, unpredictable, and unsettling. "Yes," he said softly. "Something is off. It is like the heartbeat of your world has changed. I do not know what caused it, but I can feel the imbalance." Allura nodded. "Then we must find a way to restore it." The Council of the Empire convened immediately. Nobles and scholars from every world gathered in the Crystal Palace. The mood was tense. Whispers filled the air, though no one dared speak aloud about fear. Queen Allura stood before them, her presence calm and commanding. "This is not a moment for panic," she said. "We will find the source of the imbalance and restore our harmony. I have confidence in our people and in Tom, who has shown us new ways to understand balance." Tom bowed slightly. "I will do everything I can, Your Majesty, but I will need patience. The solution will not be quick. We must listen carefully." The High Engineer led Tom to the Chamber of Resonance. The chamber had been stable for many cycles, but now even the floating crystals flickered. The hum of energy wavered like a song missing its beat. Tom walked slowly among the crystals, feeling each vibration. His eyes were closed, but his senses were alert. He touched a small floating crystal lightly, and it stilled for a moment before resuming its irregular pulse. He moved from one to another, adjusting timing, suggesting subtle shifts. And watching the response, the engineers watched in amazement. Each adjustment Tom made was simple, yet effective. It was not a burst of energy, not a bright display, but a quiet correction that brought small pieces into alignment. "This is incredible," Velis whispered. "He has no glow, yet he can influence the core. How is this possible?" Tom smiled politely. "I do not control it. I only notice the patterns and suggest small changes. The world does the rest." For hours, the team worked together, following Tom's guidance. Slowly, the hum of the chamber began to stabilize. Crystals pulsed with more regularity. The energy network across the Empire began to smooth out, and reports from distant colonies reflected the improvements. Streams flowed evenly, machines ran without error, and even the animals and plants returned to their natural rhythms. By the end of the cycle, the immediate crisis had passed. The Empire's light returned to its full brilliance, and citizens watched as the glowing cities stabilized. Yet the source of the imbalance remained unknown. Allura approached Tom in the quiet of the Chamber of Resonance. "You have saved us," she said. "But do you understand what caused this disturbance?" Tom shook his head. "Not yet. I can feel the imbalance and correct it, but the origin is beyond the patterns I can detect. Something is affecting the network from outside, or perhaps deep within the system." Allura's glow softened as she considered his words. "Then we must be prepared. If this happens again, the consequences could be greater. We must find the source before it grows beyond control." Over the next cycles, the Queen and Tom worked with engineers and scholars to investigate. They studied energy waves across the Empire, monitored the crystal's vibrations, and compared patterns from past cycles. Nothing matched the disturbance that had occurred. Tom spent long hours in the Chamber of Resonance, often sitting quietly with his eyes closed, listening to the rhythm of the Empire. He began to notice subtle anomalies, tiny fluctuations that had gone unnoticed. Patterns overlapped and intertwined in ways that were difficult to predict. The human mind, trained to observe details rather than brightness, allowed him to detect these irregularities faster than the most advanced instruments. "It is like a song with a missing note," he explained one evening to Allura. "If you listen carefully, you can find where it falters and gently restore it. But you must be patient and precise. Too much force, and the song breaks." Allura nodded. "You have taught us that strength is not always visible. Sometimes it is the quiet attention to detail that matters most." During this time, the court began to view Tom differently. Where suspicion had once filled their whispers, admiration began to grow. Nobles who had doubted him now asked for his guidance. Scholars recorded his methods. Even children of the Empire began to play games, imitating his quiet movements, pretending to listen to invisible rhythms that could change the world. The Empire itself began to adapt to Tom's approach. Engineers adjusted machinery more carefully. Gardeners studied patterns of growth rather than forcing results, and teachers encouraged young citizens to observe and listen. Subtle changes spread across the Empire, not because of power or force, but because of patience and understanding. One evening, while Tom and Allura walked through the gardens, the Queen asked, "Do you ever feel overwhelmed by this responsibility?" Tom shook his head. "I do not think of it as responsibility. I think of it as listening. The world speaks if you pay attention. It is only difficult when you forget to hear." Allura smiled. "You have reminded me that even a small presence can have great impact. Your hidden frequency has shown us that strength is not always measured by glow or energy, but by understanding." As the weeks passed, the underlying patterns of the Empire grew more stable than ever. The energy flows across planets harmonized, machinery worked efficiently, and the citizens felt a quiet reassurance. Even the stars above seemed brighter, as if responding to the newly aligned rhythms of the Empire. Yet Tom continued to sense a subtle pulse beyond the palace. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it carried a sense of change. It was not dangerous, but it was different. "Something is coming," he said one evening to Allura. "Not a threat, but a test. The harmony we restored is only temporary, if we do not understand the deeper patterns. Allura looked at him thoughtfully. Then we will face it together. Your ways, your listening, will guide us as much as my light. The Empire has learned that there is power in patience, in observation, in quiet attention. And the world will respond if we maintain balance. That is all any of us can do. In the quiet of the palace that night, the chamber of resonance glowed steadily. The crystals pulsed in perfect rhythm, reflecting the harmony Tom had helped restore. Across the Empire, citizens went about their lives with a renewed sense of peace. Machines worked without error, gardens thrived, and even the youngest students learned to observe before acting. The Queen stood beside Tom on the balcony, looking out over the glowing city. "You have changed our world," she said softly. "Not with force, but with quiet understanding. I never imagined that a human could have such power." Tom smiled. "It is not power as your people measure it. It is resonance, harmony, and attention. These are what truly shape a world." Allura nodded. She had always known that leadership required strength. But now she understood that patience and careful listening could be just as important. The human beside her had shown her a way to guide the Empire beyond light, beyond energy, and into a new kind of balance. The stars above shimmered in response, casting silver light across the palace and the city below. The day the stars dimmed had passed, but the lessons it left behind would endure. The hidden frequency of humanity, quiet yet profound, had begun to resonate across the Empire. It was a reminder that, even in a world of brilliance and glow, the smallest, calmest presence could influence everything. Queen Allura took Tom's hand and looked into his eyes. "The Empire is safe for now," she said. "But I know that this is only the beginning." Tom nodded, his gaze steady. "Then we listen, observe, and guide. The stars themselves will follow if we understand their song." And in the silence of the night, the Empire of Sarathus hummed with a renewed sense of harmony. The human had awakened a hidden rhythm that no one could see, but everyone could feel. The story of quiet strength was far from over, and the true power of humanity was only beginning to shine. The healing chamber was quiet and filled with a soft blue glow. Machines hummed gently as they monitored the man who had saved a world. Leo lay still on the white crystal bed, his eyes closed and his breathing slow. Queen Arya sat beside him, holding his hand and watching the light. Patterns on the walls shift with his heartbeat. It had been 3 days since the great battle ended. The enemy ships had drifted away into empty space, leaving behind silence and confusion. The Jareth cities were still rebuilding, but there was peace in every heart. The people spoke of the human who had stopped an army without a single weapon. They called him the Guardian of Light, but to Arya, he was still the same quiet man who smiled at sunrise and fixed broken machines in the palace courtyard. As the morning light entered the room, Leo's fingers moved slightly. His eyes opened slowly, revealing that soft blue glow that always seemed to reach deeper than words. Arya leaned closer, her face calm, but her eyes shining with emotion. "You are awake," she said softly. "You have been sleeping for 3 days?" Leo blinked and looked around. 3 days. I must have worried you." Arya smiled gently. "You did, but you also saved us. You saved the whole Empire." Leo tried to sit up, but she placed her hand on his chest. "You must rest. The healer said your energy is still recovering?" He nodded and looked up at the ceiling. "I did not want to hurt anyone. I only wanted to stop the fight." "You stopped more than a fight," Arya said. "You stopped the fear that ruled this galaxy for ages. The Dravik will think twice before bringing war again, and our people will remember what you did." Leo turned his head toward her and smiled faintly. "If they remember anything, I hope it is not me. I hope they remember peace." His words touched her heart. For the first time in many years, the Queen felt free from the weight of pride that had ruled her people. The Jarath were always strong and proud, but their strength often came from fear of weakness. Leo's calm courage had shown them another way. Later that day, the royal council gathered in the palace hall. The great crystal walls reflected the sunlight, filling the room with silver light. The council members stood in a semicircle waiting for the Queen to speak. Leo entered quietly beside her, still pale but steady on his feet. Elder Vorn, the oldest member of the council, bowed deeply. Your Majesty, the people of Jareth owe this human a debt beyond measure. We all saw what he did. He is not just one of us. He is something greater. Arya raised her hand gently. He is my husband. He is Leo of Earth. He came not as a warrior, but as a man who wished to help. His heart is his power, and it has saved us all. The council members nodded in agreement. Many of them had once doubted the Queen's choice to marry a human, but now their eyes were filled with respect. Elder Vorn spoke again. Then let it be known to all the stars. From this day, Leo of Earth shall be called the Guardian of the Empire. His name will stand beside the greatest protectors of Jareth. Leo bowed slightly. I thank you for this honor, but I am only human. Please remember that what I did because I love your queen and your people. Every human can hold the same light if they choose kindness. His simple words left the room silent. Even the proudest nobles felt humble before him. They had spent centuries seeking power through strength, yet this man had found it through love. After the meeting, the Queen and Leo walked together through the palace gardens. The flowers glowed softly under the sun, and the air smelled fresh after the recent rains. Workers and children bowed as they passed, their faces filled with joy. Arya looked at him and said, Do you realize what you have started? The people now see humans differently. Many wish to learn more about Earth. Some even want to visit your world. Leo smiled and picked up a glowing flower from the ground. Then let them. Earth still has much to learn too. Maybe our worlds can help each other grow. That night, a great celebration took place in the capital. Thousands of lights filled the sky, and ships from nearby worlds came to witness the ceremony. The Queen stood on the royal balcony, wearing her silver crown that shone like a star. Leo stood beside her in a simple robe made of white silk. The people below cheered as Arya raised her hand. Today, she announced, we begin a new age, the Age of Union. From this day forward, Jareth and Earth will share knowledge, hope, and friendship. No longer will pride or fear divide the stars. We will move together toward peace. The crowd shouted with joy. The light from the city reflected across the sky, forming patterns like living constellations. Leo watched in silence, feeling both proud and humble. In the months that followed, the two worlds worked together. Human engineers helped rebuild Jareth's old systems using modern tools, while Jareth's scientists shared their knowledge of energy and light. Together, they built new ships that could travel across galaxies faster than ever before. Young humans came to study on Jareth, learning about the energy that flowed through all living things. Young Jareth traveled to Earth and discovered the beauty of human art, music, and imagination. The bond between the two worlds grew stronger with every passing day. Leo spent much of his time teaching both humans and Jareth about balance and harmony. He said true power was not control, but understanding. He often reminded them that when two hearts listened to each other, even silence could speak. One day, while visiting a school built on the edge of the capital, Leo stood before a group of children from both worlds. A small Jareth boy asked him, Master Leo, where does your power come from? Are you a god? Leo smiled kindly. No, I am only human. My power comes from caring about others. When you love someone or protect someone, you create a light inside yourself. That light is stronger than any weapon. The children clapped, and even the teachers listened quietly. His message spread far beyond the school, carried by stories and songs. Across the galaxy, people began to believe that peace was possible. Queen Arya watched all of this with pride. She often said that Leo had changed not only her empire, but her heart. She no longer ruled through command, but through connection. Her people followed her not out of fear, but out of love. Years passed peacefully. The stars remained calm, and trade flourished between many worlds. The Queen and Leo traveled often, bringing unity wherever they went. Some called them the Light Pair, others the Keepers of Harmony. But they cared little for titles. To them, every sunrise and every smile they saw was enough. One evening, They stood together on a hill overlooking the glowing city. The sky above was filled with soft lights from ships traveling between worlds. Arya rested her head on Leo's shoulder. "You have given us so much," she said. "Sometimes I still wonder why the stars sent you to me." Leo looked at the sky and said, "Maybe the stars did not send me. Maybe we found each other because it was time for both our worlds to learn. You taught me that peace can be powerful. I only reminded your people that hearts can shine brighter than suns." She turned toward him and smiled. "Then together we made the light of two worlds." As the night deepened, the city below sang a new song. It was a song about unity, about a queen of light, and a man from Earth who brought hope to the stars. Children learned the song in both languages, and it became a hymn of peace for generations to come. When people looked up at the night sky, they saw a new constellation that formed after the great battle. It was shaped like two hands joined together, one of silver light and the other of warm blue glow. They called it the Bond. Many believed that as long as the bond shone in the sky, no great war would ever return. In the quiet of the palace, Queen Arya and Leo continued to lead with kindness. Their story was not one of conquest, but of understanding. They proved that even in a galaxy filled with endless stars, the smallest light of compassion could change everything. Leo often said that the universe was like a living heart. Every world was a beat, every being a spark. When the beats moved together, creation thrived. When they fought, the light dimmed. The queen listened, always learning from him. And in time, the people of Jareth learned as well. The empire became known as the heart of the galaxy, a place where all could come in peace. Centuries later, travelers still told the story of the queen and the human who showed the stars how to love. They said the two became eternal energy, joining the light that guides ships through the deepest parts of space. And so their love became legend, a story whispered in every world. A reminder that true strength lies not in power or fear, but in the courage to care. The queen never expected the power he hid, yet in the end, she learned that his greatest gift was not his light, but his heart.